Forward to the cloud. There we go. Cool. So just to recap that for the recording, today we're not really learning any new concepts or syntax or anything like that. We're pretty much just putting stuff together from JavaScript fundamentals and DOM manipulation. So that is all good stuff. And I think today is kind of the first day where you're probably going to actually start feeling like actual like web devs. Because components is literally like the basis of everything. Like any front-end framework that you work in is going, well, I mean, any modern front-end framework is probably components based. This is like the building blocks for React, Vue, Angular. I don't really know of any other too popular front-end frameworks that use JavaScript, but those three I know are component based. So this will be good for whatever framework that you end up working with. So good knowledge all around, and we're gonna have fun. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want me to review just really quickly before I go into tonight's lecture? Okay. Also, yes, I am putting the Slido up here. So let me share this. If you guys want to join on Slido, let's make sure you mute yourselves when you come in. Mute. There we go. So go ahead, join that Slido. Post your questions in there, please. If for whatever reason that link doesn't work, I'm going to put the number in there. So that's the code I've put as a comment in that channel link. So feel free to post your questions in there. Of course, I'll be monitoring Slack as well, but it's easier for me if everyone just does it in Slido. Cool. So just kind of recap this before we jump into things. At the end of the module, you should be able to describe what a component is and identify different parts of a component. Write a function that utilizes create element and returns a new DOM element, and iterate over a list of data, creating a new component for each item and attaching that component to the DOM. Any questions on what we're going to be learning tonight? Yeah, adding like semi-complex new elements. Cool. It's like no questions about what we're doing. So I'm gonna kind of introduce the project that we've got here. There's, you know, 3 different sections to it. We've got the HTML, the CSS, and the JS. So we're gonna take a look first at our HTML. So it looks pretty normal. We've got this kind of like header section with our nav in it, and then this main content section right here with this text. And then down here, we have a secondary container with a bunch of basically copy-pasted code in here, right? We've got an accordion class. So an accordion is just like this, is a term we use to talk about kind of like a display of content that looks like this, where there's a couple of panels of stuff underneath each other. So we have an accordion with a bunch of panels of text in it. And all I've done is I've literally just taken this first panel and just pasted it in a few times. So I can paste it as many times as I want and get as many articles in there as I want. But can someone already see what kind of the issue with this kind of structure is? What's the issue with just copy pasting this 50 times? It's not dry. Yeah, it's literally the same content. We're being redundant. That's a good word. It's not efficient. Yeah, here's the CodePen link. So those are all correct answers. That's what I was really looking for, David. David says it's hard to make changes the more copy-pasted elements you have. So with this, if I wanted to change the title for, if I wanted to have a different title for each of them, I'd have to go in here and actually manually edit, each one to have something different in it. And if you've got like 50 articles, that's just a huge pain, right? Like nobody wants to deal with going through and like copy pasting in 50 different articles and trying to format it and all that kind of stuff. That's just a huge pain. And especially once we get down here where, there's a panel that should have some actual, like an actual article in it right here. Right now it just says content of panel. And we don't actually see it right now because this button we don't have working yet. Basically, we should click this button and it'll open up and show more content. Obviously, it's not implemented yet, so it's not working. But the more content we have, basically, the more of a pain it is to just copy paste this stuff over and over again. So we are going to use components to kind of make our lives a lot easier. So I'm literally just going to get rid of that whole thing. We're pretty much just going to start from an empty div. And then if we look at the CSS, it'll probably be a little bit more illuminating. So we've got kind of the usual stuff. So we've got some colors here. We've got our just like default stuff. We've got border box on, body, font, container, main content. All this stuff looks pretty normal. And then we get down into the accordion. Accordion looks pretty normal. Panel is fine. We start getting into a little bit more complex stuff down here, especially with our button, our hide button, and our panel content, and our toggle on. So these are probably kind of confusing at first glance, and they don't really do anything until we add JavaScript into this. So JavaScript is basically going to let us kind of procedurally generate these panels with working buttons that when we click them, it'll basically toggle certain certain parts of the component on and off. We'll be able to see different parts based on when we click the button. So right now, obviously not functional. We just got rid of that HTML as well, so it's just like not there at all. But we're eventually gonna be using this stuff. So just remember that that's a thing. And then right now, all we have in here is just an array. So this array is going to be kind of the data that we're working with for today's lecture. Tomorrow, not tomorrow, sorry, next class, we're going to be using more dynamic content. I think we actually dive into an API in the next class, which is really cool. But for tonight, we're just going to use an array of objects to populate the data for our panels. So this is pretty cool. So if I'm going to start out, the first thing that I want to do is I want to get a reference to this div here. Can anyone remind me of how I do that? How do I get a reference to a div? Query selector. Cool. Query selector. And then I want accordion. I'm gonna console log it just to make sure that I spelt everything right. There we go, cool. So we've got the right div. Excellent work, step one down. Cool. So the next thing that we're actually gonna do is we're gonna create a pretty big function, actually. I think this will probably be one of the bigger ones that we've actually seen so far. So this will be cool. And this is actually like, slightly abstracted a little bit. This is actually stuff that you'll do on the job. Like when I said earlier that this is kind of where you start to feel like a real web dev, I say that because these are actually things that you will do as a web developer. Like, you know, we've kind of been learning like the little like basics and fundamental skills, like just how to do, you know, basic JavaScript. And it's kind of been like math homework almost up to this point. But this is actual like real stuff that you're actually going to do on the job. So pay attention. So we're going to create a function that returns a new DOM element. And we're going to feed in a title and some content. And it's basically just going to take the title and the content of one of these objects and dynamically create stuff with them. And then it's way easier to add more content. So if I want this function to just create more stuff, all I have to do is copy paste this in here and create, you know, something new with some other text and other text. And now I don't have to go monkey around all over the place. It's in one position. I don't have to worry that my data is different in different places or anything like that. It's just in the one place. So that is cool. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to create a new DOM element. Does anyone remember how to use create element? Let's get some people typing in Slack. How do we do create element? We use create element to create something. We'll just do a div for now. Right, document.create element. Perfect, Blair. And then if we want to make a div, we just put div in there. So, not bad. I'm going to go through and let me actually put this back in here. I'm going to grab one of these copy-pasted things so that I can reference the class names and stuff. That's where it ends. So let's grab this. Okay. So I'm just going to put this here so I have a reference for the names of the classes that we're using. So right now, I'm pretty much just going to go down and create an element for each one of these different types of classes in here. So we're going to make a panel bar, panel buttons, button open, button close, and all that stuff. So we can kind of do this same functionality, basically. It's a div, oops, create element. So we can kind of just do the same thing for all of them here. So all we're doing right now is, this one is an H3. So all we're doing is creating the individual pieces of this. And they're kind of just like existing off in space right now, right? These, basically all we're doing is we're creating memory where these will exist, but they don't actually exist on the DOM yet. We haven't added them to the DOM. They're kind of just floating out there in the universe right now. That's why nothing's actually showing up on the screen yet, even though we're creating these things. They also don't have references to those classes or anything yet, so they have no styling on them. So, oops, class, button, panel, oops, panel equals document.create elements. What is that? It's a div. We've got const button open equals document.create element button. And I'm just going to copy paste this one for button close. And then we have panel content. So const panel content equals document.create element div. Cool. So let me just reference real quick, make sure you've got everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Cool. So that matches up. Let me read chat. I see chat going off a little bit. Tommy says, how can we add a class to one of those divs made with the document.create element? Michelle is correct. You shall see in a couple minutes. Yeah, Harry is right. It's classlist.add, but we're actually going to implement that in just a couple minutes. Let me check Slido. Cool. Excellent. No questions yet. Feel free to post questions up, guys. I'm going to check at least every like 5-10 minutes. So. So we've got all of our different elements created now. And if I console log stuff out, we can see that they do exist. So if I save this, clear. Oh. I hate the autosave, auto update. I like having the button. Come on. Oh yeah, it won't actually console anything because I haven't added any text or anything to it yet. So like, it doesn't really know. Oh, also I'm not calling it. Actually, I lie. It would be showing up if I was calling this, but I'm not. So eventually we're gonna return the panel. So if I do create console.log create panel. Yeah, so we get back empty div. If I return this function right now. We got it back twice because I console logged it and it's also being returned. So I'll just leave myself a note to say, this is the console log 1. Cool. So we have proof that this div exists, and I'll do a button as well, just to show you guys that these do exist, even though they're not on the screen. Yeah, so we've got a button as well. Have I lost anyone yet? Is there any questions so far? Someone on Slido says, did you just recreate the page? I didn't recreate it yet. What I've done is I've created all of the sub-elements of it. So if we look on here, I've created this div, this H3, this div, these two buttons, and this div. I haven't added any of the classes to it. I haven't added any text content or anything like that. I haven't actually called this function anywhere except in this console log, so these don't actually exist yet. But I've created the sub-elements, so we're getting ready to recreate the page. Excuse me. When you return panel, is that just the container that holds everything, so it would render everything you created? Yeah, that's the idea. So if we look at the HTML right here, we can see that panel is kind of the enclosing div of everything for this section here. So we're going to append this stuff such that it mimics this hierarchy here. So by the end of the guided project, this panel bar div will be appended to panel, and then this H3 and this div will be appended to panel bar, and then these two buttons will be appended to panel buttons, and so on and so forth. We don't need a console log. Like, you never need a console log. A console log is just to make sure that you're clear on what you're expecting. Like, I console log pretty much everything. Like, anytime I'm doing anything, I'll almost always console log it back immediately after I write whatever part of the function I'm working on, just to make sure that I didn't make a typo or do something dumb. Because if you get really like far in the weeds after you make some silly mistake like that, and then you spend like 3 hours trying to like debug something that just turns out to be a typo, it's like so soul crushing. So console logs save a lot of heartache for you. So I recommend just console logging everything all the time until you get introduced to more advanced debugging techniques like the actual debugger in VS Code and stuff. Console log is going to be your best friend. Cool. Looking good. All right. So let's go back into this guy and actually get some of that appending going. Actually, yeah, I'll get the appending going, and then we will get stuff rendering on the screen, so it's not all like a big jumbled mess. So, like I said, we're just going to mimic this hierarchy so that things are appended appropriately. So, with that said, we are appending child. The panel bar is appended to panel. The content, panel content is appended to panel. And then we've got, under panel bar, we've got the H3 and the panel buttons. So I'll do panel bar dot append child. We've got panel title. And we've got button panel. And then to button panel dot append child, we've got button open and button close. And I think that's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. So that should be everything. So now if I return this, it's going to be a lot more stuff. Comes up in our console log here. Or does it? Or where is my expected console log? Let me see. Do I have an error? Oh. They changed append child recently? Let me see if it just wants append. Oh no, you guys are so right. I've got this dash here and it is like that. Oops. That's what I'm talking about right there. See, that would have caused me to debug this forever if you guys hadn't said something. So let's see if that goes now. There we go. Cool. So now we're starting to see something going on here, right? So we've got all of the opening tags on this side, and then we've got all the closing tags on the other side there. So if I like grab this thing and drop it in, oop, that's not what I want. And do this. Double clicked. Oh, I didn't double click, it's just being annoying. So this structure looks familiar already, right? So if I grab this back here and put it like right next to this one. We can see that it pretty much is looking very similar already. We've got that same hierarchy right there. So we've successfully set up kind of the formatting of our HTML, which is good. Anyone have any questions so far? Someone on Slido says, can you walk through how you knew what to put for the append child statements? Yeah. Excuse me. So all I did was keeping in mind the structure that we were going for. I basically just, I'm going to draw here. I basically just connected the dots, kind of. Let me rid of some spaces. Okay. So the question was, how did I know what to append to what? So if this is panel, and this is panel bar, and this is panel title, and then we've got button, panel, open, close, and content. You basically just kind of map it in your head. So if I have panel as the base here, I know that the things one down in the hierarchy should be appended to that. So these two should be appended to that. And therefore, I've appended to panel. The next level down, the H3 and this div are being appended to panel bar, which is right here. So we're just basically going down levels, and then, you know, so on for the next one. So for this two sets of buttons here, they're appended to button panel. So and there's one more down here that's not on the screen. But yeah, you're basically just going down the list and kind of filling in the blanks. Is the drawing helpful? Okay. What about nesting? Yeah, that's what we've done. So we're all we're doing is we're nesting. That's kind of just like another term to say like levels or hierarchy are terms that are probably somewhat interchangeable with nested. So this div is nested inside of this div. So it's one level down in the hierarchy in kind of like the same, you know, instance. Can you use commas to append multiple items at a time, or do you have to do one by one? As far as I know, you have to do one by one. Even if you could do multiple in one line, I'd personally probably keep them separate just so that you know like what order stuff is getting appended. You don't have to look all along a line. This structure is much easier to read for me than like a big old list of things would be and inside one set of paren. But you know, if you're interested in shortening your code like that, go for it as long as it works for you, as long as it's readable. That's my advice. Just make sure that you can understand what you're actually doing, because like you will see this phenomenon even now. If you go back and look at your like UI1 project or whatever, you're going to be like, what was I doing? I was so bad at coding like a month ago. Like I'm so much better already than I was a month ago, and I have no idea what I was thinking. Like I go back and look at code that I wrote at work like 6 months ago, and I'm like, oh my God, why did they ever hire me to code? I was so bad. But that's like the main thing, is just make sure that it's something that you're going to be able to understand in a couple months. Where did I get panel content from? Panel content right here is just one of the divs that I created. It matches up to this div of panel content. Thanks for the link there, Alan. If you guys are curious, Alan has posted a link about a pen versus a pen child. Cool. So looks like we're good with the appending for the most part. If you guys do have more questions, please feel free. I'm going to do, let's see. You guys have done classless stuff. You did classless stuff in the DOM section that I missed, I believe. That's correct, right? You guys have worked with classless. Yes, you have. Okay, cool. So in that case, I'm going to give you guys a code challenge. So do you guys want to break first, or do you want to do the code challenge and then have a break? We want a break. We want code. We want break. Okay. We'll just do a break. It's about 50-50. So I'll do a break, let people rest for 5 minutes, and then we'll do a little code challenge. So take a break and be back in 5. And resume. There we go. Cool. I actually remembered. I'm like really proud of myself right now. I remembered to continue recording. What an event this has been. Okay. So let me comment this a little bit before I have you guys go around and add stuff to it. In this section, we are setting up our HTML structure. In this section, we are recreating each sub-element of our component. And then in this section, we are adding CSS classes back in. So this is what I'm going to have you guys do. I'm going to do one example, and then I'm going to give you guys, I'll give you guys 7.5 minutes to do the rest. So it's got knocked off render monitor. Oop, that was not great. Okay, so I'm going to add the class back onto our panel. And then in order to do this, we're going to have to reference up here where we've got our actual component that we're recreating. So I'm grabbing this class panel. So I'm adding panel. And now to check that I did my work correctly, again, I can take this console log and drop that bad boy in there. And now we should get back a console log that has a class on it. Cool. Obviously, it gets a little hard to read once we've got all of this stuff in there, but you can see that we've got our div class equals panel right there. So in order to check yourself as you're going, just make sure that you keep seeing new class names get added each time. We're not going to see anything on the screen yet, so don't be scared that you don't see anything on the screen. Just use the console, check your work for now. Use this one as an example, and I want you guys to add the classes back on for these other 6. Any questions before I let you guys loose to do this? Yes, Michael is correct. Add some happy little console logs. Not seeing any questions. If there are questions, just continue typing. I'll be monitoring the chat as you guys are doing this. So, going to link this guy again. Code challenge. Use class list to add back in CSS classes. There we go. So I'm going to put 7 minutes on the clock, or 7 minutes and 30 seconds, I think I said. So away you go. Recording resumed. Gosh, I'm getting good at this. So if you guys want to share the work that you did, feel free to post it in the thread that I put up. I'll take a look at a couple of them. There's not too much visual really that we can see on these guys yet, obviously. So I'm not going to like look at them too long, but it'll be fun to just see some of your classmates' stuff, right? Cool. I'll do these couple. Nice. So we've got panel. Let's actually look at the code here. We've got classless add panel. So that's the one that I've done. Classless add panel bar. Button open, button close, button content. Yep, I mean, this looks right to me. As long as there's no typos in here, this should work. And again, we've got classless add. It's good stuff. A lot of the time, people forget to like capitalize the L, so that's good. We've got panel bar, panel buttons, button open, button close, hide button, and panel content. Yeah, this is something that I didn't mention, so that's good. Let's see, panel close. Yeah, so you've added both classes on there, so that's cool. And yeah, and then the panel content. One more. We've got. Excuse me, we've got classless add. Looking quite familiar. Yeah, the syntax works as well. Let's see. Button, where are we? Panel bar. Let's see. Just want this one console to double check that you can have both of the classes in that one. This is the console logged one. If I inspect this, failed to execute add on DOM token list. Okay, looks like you can't do that. It has HTML space characters, which are not valid in token. I wonder if you can do commas. I don't recall. Let's see. There, I think that works. Yeah, so we've got button, close, and hide button now in the same. So you can actually do a comma here to add them both. So that's cool. Good attempt in trying to get them all in one together. Just be aware that this is the syntax for doing that. And then we've got Sean. Add. Got a typo here, but otherwise looking all right. You didn't add the hide button, but that's fine because we're going to do something different with that anyway. So I should have mentioned that, but if you didn't add the hide button, don't feel bad because we're going to do something different with it. And then we've got, yeah, it looks like you tried to do the same thing here. So just remember, we have to do it this way to have multiple classes get added. So each one is a string separated by commas. Oops. Yeah, good job, everyone. Thanks, everyone that posted in there. I know it can be spooky to show off your code in front of people, especially people you don't really know. So good job flexing our bravery sharing muscles. Cool. So I'm going to just mimic you guys real quick and add the rest of these classes on here. So I've got panel content.classlist.add. I'm just going to copy paste this to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there is. To panel bar, panel title, button panel, button open, button close. Oh, I added one extra one. So I'm going to add all those real quick. And then I am going to do panel bar, panel title is just, I think it's just unstyled, actually. Panel title, yeah, it's just a regular old H3. So I'll comment that one out, actually. And I've got button panel, which is panel buttons. We've got button open, panel button open. And then we've got the same thing down here. I'm going to add the hide button as well. Hide button, I think it was hide button. Yes. And then we've got panel content. Cool. So let me make sure that I have done this correctly. See if we get our console log back without issue. Cool. So we've got panel, panel bar, panel buttons, an H3, panel button open, panel button close, hide button, and panel content. Cool. So is everyone in the loop right now? Is anyone lost? Let's make sure that we're all set. Someone says in Slido, does it matter the order you enter the classes in JavaScript? I'm assuming you mean like right here. Yeah, anything that gets added after will be applied after, just like in CSS. So like if you have one class and then you add another class to it, it may overwrite some aspects of the first class that you add. So the order does matter. Cool. And if you guys don't want to, like, I try to make things open for people that are shy and stuff like that. Like, if you don't want to type that you don't know something in the big group chat, feel free to just like message me. Make sure you message the right account though, because I still have a student Slack account that I have not opened in like over a year now. So just make sure it's the instructor one. Yeah, so we've got this working, so that's good. And then now, really pretty much the last thing that we're actually going to do with, our buttons here, or sorry, not buttons, with our elements here is add the actual text content and stuff. So I'm going to drop and drag some stuff in here real quick. So these are, don't be like intimidated or confused by these. These are just Unicode codes. All this, I'm going to leave a note here. These are Unicode symbols. They look like triangles in text. So these are just like going to be like visual buttons for us, basically. Don't be put off by the weird thing right there. I will hopefully at the end of everything. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Bevin. I'll try to like review over everything at the end, and hopefully kind of like going through it a second time will help a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually add some text content. So my button open.text content is going to equal open. So all I'm doing there is I'm saying that for my open button, I want it to have text content that equals this Unicode phrase here. So I'm going to do the same thing with button close, except it'll be close. And then panel content dot text content, we're actually going to set it equal to whatever we feed in here as content. So we're going to use this word content here. So all this does is say whatever content we feed into this function, set it to be our panel content. And same thing with panel title. It's going to equal the title because we're feeding in a title right here. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any issue with that? Someone asked how to add an ID attribute or a source attribute. If you want to add a source, you can do whatever. You can do, for an ID, I think it's just like, I honestly don't remember adding an ID off the top of my head. I'll have to Google that. I can Google that during like the next break though and show it real quick. What is that /u stuff? So this, again, these are just Unicode symbols, Unicode character codes. So these are just ways that different symbols get translated basically into code. So like it's going to be one of these like funky symbols here. You can see it's called an escape sequence. So that's just how you use Unicode. And those Unicode symbols are just going to be like triangles for buttons. Yeah. Michael says it's element.id equals whatever. So I will trust his word on that. So I don't programmatically add IDs too often, to be honest with you guys. So I'd have to Google that to just confirm that, but I trust him. He's a smart guy. Cool. Yeah, here's a Unicode. Here's this Unicode link if you guys want to take a look at it. Let's see. Yeah, I know this can definitely be a lot at once, and like this is a lot of stuff to like deal with in one lecture for sure. So if you're feeling overloaded right now, that's perfectly fine. We're pretty much just doing this for this lecture and the next lecture. The next lecture, we just add like one or two more little things. It's really just kind of getting down, adding everything all together. Cool. Would panel open.source open an image link on button click? No. So that would be a bad example. I would want to make an image and change the source. I don't have any images on this page, but if I wanted to, I could do like image, like const panel image equals document dot create element image, and I can do panel content dot append child panel image. I'm commenting these out because I don't actually have any content for them, but this would be how you would add an image. Panel image dot class list dot add image class example, and then we could do panel image dot source equals a link. So that's how you would add you know, a source to an image. And I think we do actually do this in the lesson tomorrow, or sorry, in the next class. So don't be too concerned about this yet. We definitely go over it prior to the sprint challenge. Yeah, I know. It's a lot, guys. It's for sure a lot. And I don't blame any of you for like being head explosion right now. It's a lot of stuff. And we realize that. But if you get to the point where you're understanding this lesson, you're going to be in good shape for the sprint challenge, because this is like 90% of it. So you guys should be good by your 5th day. Cool. So let's finish this off now then. Well, not finish it off, but let's get something on the screen now, is what I meant to say. We're going to add a little bit more stuff to this later, but we're going to actually get it going on the screen now. So we're going to take this array. Just remember, this is just an array of objects that have a title and content. We're going to actually get these guys generating. So just off the top of y'all's head, how do we think that we're going to iterate over an array to create something? What's kind of the first thing that pops into your head? New for each loop, we can do an arrow function like map, right? Yeah, we can do map or for each. Those are kind of the two main options. I'm going to stick with for each for now. So what we're going to do here is we're literally going to loop over each object in this panel data array, which is right here. So this is just our array of objects that we're using. So we're going to iterate over that array, and for each content, we are going to, first of all, I'm going console log content. From for each loop. So this is making sure that we're getting a complete thing. So I'm going to actually just run this real quick and make sure that we get what we're expecting before I render it on the screen. Cool. This is looking like something, right? So yeah, so we're getting each of our 5 objects back. So that's cool. So now we can go back in here. We can actually create panel. So that's the name of our function here. So we're actually going to call this function. We have to put in our title and our content. How am I going to access the title and the content in here? Anyone help me out with accessing the title and the content? Right, content.title, exactly. We're using that dot syntax that we just talked about the other night. Content. Yeah, title and content, cool. So that's good. So let's run this and see what happens. And I'm actually going to, yeah, let's just run it. Okay. So we're getting this text back still, but we're not actually getting anything on the screen. Does anyone know why we're not getting stuff on the screen? We've made the stuff, right? It exists. We know that it exists. We need to put it somewhere, exactly. So how do we, exactly, Tender, you took the words right out of my mouth. We have to append it to the DOM. So we're going to take our accordion that we initially grabbed, and we're going to append child and just wrap this whole thing. And now we get stuff. And none of this is like copy pasted in, right? This is all dynamically done. This button doesn't work yet. We're going to get to that in a second, but this is like 90% of it, right? This is awesome. So before I go on and add an event for this button, is there any specific thing that I can go over real quick that might help someone better understand? Someone asks in Slido, is there a benefit of building an entire website like this instead of basic HTML, CSS, or less? What's the difference? So it might, like, this isn't necessarily like the best example of why components are useful, but if you think about it in terms of like an actual like big website, it becomes a little more clear. So if we look at like, so the website, I can show you. If we look at like Amazon, Amazon.com. So if we look at Amazon, if we search for dog toy, if we look down here, all these, like if you break this website down into components, the whole thing is components, right? Like if I'm going to draw a little bit on the screen. So this whole box here that goes down to the end of the page is a component. Each one of these little cards is a component. This sidebar thing here is a component. This whole sidebar is a component. Yeah, like going down, the whole thing is a component. And the reason that they even bother with components is because if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, there's 7 pages of this stuff. So they're reusing that component for all of these pages, and not just for the dog toys, right? Like this same structure applies to their entire website. We can search anything on here and it would be calling the same components. And they've got, you know, like millions of things for sale on Amazon. So instead of having to make a specific, you know, structure for each subtype or like even for every single item, that would be insane. Like there would not be enough programmers in the world to do that. So instead they make components which are much more reusable, and they just feed data into it to make them unique. Cool. So it looks like we don't have too many questions. As always, feel free to just post more if you got them. So what I'm going to do now is actually add the event on here to get our buttons to work. And then that's actually going to be it pretty much. So we'll do a little bit of a review and go back over what we've done in class. And then we'll do an introduction of the homework, and that'll be that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add an event so that this button will actually hide and show our content on click. So we're going to add on button panel an event listener. I'll just do a click event. I don't want to be fancy. First of all, I'm just going to console log button clicked. See if that's working. So now if I pull up my console, button clicked, button clicked, button clicked, button clicked, and button clicked. So it works on all of them. So that's awesome. Now we're going to actually get, get rid of this console log, cluttering stuff up. Now we're going to actually add some functionality into this event listener. So we're going to take our button open, class list toggle hide button. So what this is going to do, toggle basically will just, if this class is present, it'll get rid of it, and if the class isn't present, it'll add it. So it's just like an on-off switch basically for a class. So we're going to add or remove the hide button on button open, and then we're going to do the same thing on button close. And then there's one more class in here, toggle on. So we're going to use toggle on for our actual panel content. So panel content dot class list dot toggle on. Sweet. Francois asked, do we need the dot for hide button? We do not, because class list only works with classes, so it's assumed that you're putting a class in there. But now we have working buttons for everything. This is awesome, right? So yeah, this is how you build like an actual website. And you'll notice that this little triangle, that's the Unicode character I was talking about. So you'll notice that it flips when we open and close. So the down arrow is our close button. So that's actually rendering our close button right there. And the open one is rendering our upward facing arrow. So are there any questions on components? Right. Could you explain classlist.toggle again? Okay, yeah. So I'm going to draw. So actually, let me open one before I start drawing. So actually, I should have a different color. Okay. So by default, our class list for button open does not have hide button on it, but our class list for button close does. So when we initially load our page, button close, which is this one, has a hide button on it. And it also has panel button close. And our open button has panel button open, and that's it. So when we click on this, we toggle the classes. So what that means is we are taking our hide button and basically flipping it. So when we click on a button close, we get rid of the hide button on that one, and we put it on this one. That's what toggling does. It's just like if you have the class on an element, it gets rid of it. If you don't have it on that element, it adds it. Talk through toggle. If I wasn't clear enough about toggle, please say something. How did it know that the title content would go into the H3 and the content would go into the div class panel content? Let me erase my drawing. That is a good question. So we actually set that right here. So all we're doing is setting the text content equal to the title and the content that we feed in. And that gets fed in right here. And we're actually saying it right here. So that's how that text content gets fed in. We're calling the create panel function that we created with the values of each object, object.title, object.content. And then that eventually down here gets set to the text content. Can I go back to where I got the accordion? Right here? Yeah, let me know what you need from here. While you're asking your question or copying this or whatever, I'm gonna answer the question. How do you make the buttons without the unit character? You don't need the unit characters here, like the Unicode characters. You can just like import an image. That's a common way of doing it, is just importing an image and having whatever picture be the source of your button, basically. You can just put like open, close, and then obviously you'd have to like fit that text in there or whatever. But you know, it's really just like stylistic, however you want to stylistically have your code that way. There are also like a ton of like import libraries for styling for buttons and stuff like that, which you guys will, I'm sure, become familiar with. Majority of all the code we see was written inside the function, correct? Yeah, so if we look at our function, it goes from, this whole thing is our function that we just made. So inside the function, we create the elements, we append them to each other, we add the classes, we set the text content, and we add the event listeners. Cool. Yeah, Font Awesome is a good site for buttons and icons and stuff like that. Confused about toggle, so elements have to be siblings to go back and forth. No, not at all. You're not it doesn't matter actually what element you put it on. It is completely about like the CSS class, really. So like the reason that it's toggling is because we initially have hide button on here. So that makes sure that our button close is hidden in the beginning. And then when we click it, it takes that off. So it effectively looks like that now on the DOM and moves it to here instead. So they don't have to be siblings or anything like that. It's just, you know, whatever CSS class you're putting it on. If I wanted to, I could do, I could add another thing to this too. I could do like, I can get rid of the whole panel bar if I want to. So I think panel bar, where are you? Where does the panel bar live? Panel bar. Okay, so our panel bar, I click this. Yeah. So I just got rid of it basically by clicking that button there. So you can attach the classes to whatever you want. And now obviously this is going to mess everything up because I just got rid of the buttons, but yeah, so you can hook that up however you please, basically is what I'm saying. Cool. Can you change content to X, for example, line 50? Line 50. Yeah, this is just a made up word. I could do X if I wanted to. They just have to match up. So this is a banana word. You can say whatever. Everything still works fine. Yeah, exactly, Michelle. Sorry, I didn't see your comment while I was discussing that. Yeah, so we're just adding toggle and swapping them off basically so that one button is always rendered on the screen. So if I take the hide button off of here and I run it without the hide button, oops. If I just run it this way, there's the two buttons here. So having that hide button class attached in the beginning just hides the one of them so that only the relevant one is showing. Yeah, that's a good point, Blair. I'm not sure that I actually looked over that too closely, so I should do that real quick. So the hide button, literally all that's in there is display none. We're just hiding that from displaying. And toggle on gets put onto our, so it get added to our panel content, which, where's panel content? Yeah, our panel content by default has display none on it. So we're just adding a display block to it. So we're basically just playing around with our display option in that event. Yes, functions are very powerful. Cool. Okay. Did anyone have any more questions or concerns before I do kind of like a re-go over / wrap up? Cool. Okay. If you do, just continue typing and I'll get to them. Okay, so I'm just going to go over this real quick one more time. We start off with our data. For now, we're just using static data in an array of objects that we actually have in our JS file. And we're trying to recreate this section of HTML that we took out. And this is the eventual structure that we end up having, which mimics it perfectly. So the first thing that we did was we grabbed the accordion. So we just did a simple query selector. And then we started working on our function, create panel. We feed in a title and content, which eventually get used later. But first, we create all of our elements. So this is just creating everything that we're going to need. Then we append them to each other as needed. So this allows us to set up that structure that that I just showed earlier. And then our class lists, we are just adding the styling back in. And in order to do this effectively, we have to actually reference the CSS page or that HTML that we took out. So we just have to reference this so we know what class links up to which piece of code. And then we set up our actual content here. So we are creating this Unicode escape value and setting that for the buttons. And then the content and the title actually get set to those content and title values that we feed in as parameters to this function. And then finally, we add an event listener to the button panel, which is a click event. And all it does is it toggles on and off our hide and toggle classes. So that'll make this happen, basically. We're just turning content on and off with a button click. And then the last part was we created this for each loop, which just appends each child. It creates a panel for each object in that panel data array, and then it appends each one of those panels to Accordion. So that is everything we've done tonight. Does anyone have any further questions that they want to ask before I introduce our homework? I see some people typing, so I'll give it a minute before I start talking about homework stuff. That's fine, Dawn. Is the return panel from line 57? Yeah, so this is we're returning this panel here. At the bottom here, we return panel. So we're returning this this const panel that we created because it's the root of everything, right? So panel this is const panel. So if we return panel, we're returning this whole thing. That's why we're returning panel. Cool. Good stuff. Will I post that for us? Yeah, I'll post it right now, and I'll post it again after class. So here, in case you lost the link, here's this. What is hiding the content from being shown? So if we look at our CSS classes here, panel content by default has display none on it. So that's why it's not initially shown. We toggle on, in this event, we toggle on, which changes it to display block. So we're effectively just overriding this display none with a display block. Where did I pull .accordion from at the top? So .accordion is just this div right here. So it'll always go back to the HTML. Even in React, there's going to be an index.html that everything is built out of, and it just references basically your root div for the whole project. So we just grab from that div. Do you normally lay it out in HTML first so you can see how it should look like? For this components section, that's probably helpful. Once we get into actual React, it becomes unnecessary because we're going to essentially replace HTML with something else, which is very similar in syntax, but is going to be a little bit different in implementation. Oh, so the class accordion is where we are creating everything and where we add an API. So yeah, so our component gets added here. Our component is added here. I wouldn't use the phrasing as where we add an API. So an API is just it's basically just a way to communicate with another application. So if you're working with an API on the internet that some other company has made available, it's called an open API. Basically, you can send requests to that API on that company's server somewhere, and it'll send you information back based on what you're requesting, or you can send information to it to be stored in that database somewhere, or whatever you're trying to do. It'll basically allow you to send data back and forth with someone, some other company or some other source of information. So that's essentially kind of the purpose of an API. You don't add an API unless you're building it yourself. You call an API. So you'll have another JavaScript file that handles API calls for the most part. But we don't get too deep into that in this section, so don't worry about that just yet anyway. Cool. Looks like that is most of our questions. If you've got anything else, keep typing and I'll answer. I'm going to go over our homework for tonight now though. So our project is building a newsfeed. So this is going to be very similar to what we did in tonight's guided project. We're going to be creating, I believe all the HTML and CSS is pretty much set up for you. So here's the HTML. So yeah, this is more what you can expect our HTML to look like from now on. It's very, very little, right? Like all we have is kind of these root sections. So that's kind of what you can expect now. So we see this articles tag. We know we're probably going to put a component in here. I think there's one more section that we have to add. But yeah, you can see places where we're going to add our components in. And then we're going to use less. So that should be familiar to you guys by now. We have to import the less into our index.less, so you guys get some practice with the less stuff again. And then there's actually going to be inline instructions in the articles.js file to complete the functionality that they want you to have. So if we look in our article.js file, you see that we have another array of objects here. So this is this should look familiar, hopefully. And then we have step-by-step instructions for you guys. So create a function that creates a component. That's just going to be like our create panel function. It gives you the structure that they want you to follow. So they want to have a div with an h2 and 3 p tags and a button in it. And then add an event listener, return the component, map over the data to create an object for each one, and then add the new article to the array, or add a new article to the array. So they literally just want you to type in like another object in here so that you can add a new card for yourself. So that's not too bad. And then we've got, we're fixing the menu. So the menu is broken. So we'll check out the menu file real quick. So we've got another array that we can iterate over. We're writing another function to follow this format. And they want you to actually do the loop inside the function this time, because we're only creating one menu. So we're going to loop over this array inside the function. Going to select the button that's already on the DOM to probably append stuff to, and then another click event, return the component, and add the menu component to the DOM. Cool. So you're basically doing what we did tonight twice. So this will be a fun one for you guys. There's a ton of stretch goals as well. So we can do CSS animations, we can play with jQuery, we can play with GreenSock again. And yeah, these are not required. Don't feel like you have to do them, but these are things that you can do if you want to stretch a little bit. So are there any questions before we get going? Harry asks, is jQuery still used? jQuery is actually, I think, the most widely used JavaScript library right now in existence. It was really, really heavily used like 5 to 15-ish years ago. It was really popular a while back, basically. But there are still tons of companies that use it. There are still tons of companies that maintain jQuery database, or not databases, jQuery code bases. So even if you're not necessarily like working on new tech with jQuery, there's still a lot of jobs that deal with jQuery. So it's not like, it's not a waste of time to learn it if that's what you're asking. Especially in government jobs or like healthcare stuff, anything that's like a really big like government dealing with type industry, there's probably a lot of jQuery in there because they don't care if they're on the cutting edge. Like they just want it to work. They want it to be cheap and easy to build and easy to maintain. And like everyone in the world can pick up jQuery in like 5 minutes of trying. So jQuery is just like a really easy option for people looking for cheap dev work. So, so yeah, go for it if you wanna learn it. Cool. I'll give like another 30 seconds for people to type stuff while I'm like outroing myself. Yeah, I remember like the first time I ever picked up JavaScript, it was like a jQuery like workbook or something in like 11th grade, I think. So that's some OG stuff for sure. All right, looks like we're all set for questions. And of course, if you have any more, feel free to just drop them in the chat. I'll be around for most of the rest of the night. If I don't get back to you immediately, it's because I'm cooking dinner and stuff, but I'll message you back before I go to bed at least. So everyone have a great night. I hope you had a good lesson, and I will see you on Wednesday. So goodbye.